forewarning you.
Good evening, everyone. It's so nice to see so many familiar faces. Just give me a thumbs up if you could hear me. Excellent. So I want to start off this evening with a Devar Torah on this week's Parsha, and then lead into a couple of topics regarding safety and community, and then have a conversation with our guest co-host, Dr. David Delazerte, and then end off the evening with a presentation by Rabbi Avi Baswich regarding the education in our school. I also very much, and we'll say this a few times tonight, next week there will be specific town halls for each of the divisions in Hebrew Academy, and I encourage you to partake in those town halls as we will go into very much detail of the program. So in this week's Parsha V'eschanan, it's my favorite scene on the entire Torah. Moshe is on the way out of his life, and he had one request. He's one thing that he constantly wanted from this world, that he constantly prayed for from Hashem, and that one thing was to enter into Israel. And he cries out to Hashem, he cries out to God, he's like, please let me go in. And Hashem tells him, no, you're not allowed to go in. But Hashem tells him something interesting. He says, Alei Rosh HaPiskah, you should go to the top of the mountain. Visa einecha, and place your eyes. Yama v'tzafona v'sema u'mizracha. Place your eyes to the east, to the north, to the south, and to the west. U're'ei v'einecha ki lo sa'avor es hayarden hazeh. That you will see with your eyes that you will not cross over into this Yarden. And now it's very strange. If you think about it, Moshe is facing Israel. He's facing Israel, looking at it to the east. And Hashem tells him, look to the east. What does he see? He sees Israel. Look to the north. What does he see? He sees Israel. Looks to the south. What does he see? He sees Israel. But then Hashem tells him, turn around. Look to the west. Now, if Hashem is telling Moshe to look into Israel, Moshe is saying, all I want to do is go into Israel. All I want to do is go into the land and to see the land. And God tells him, no, you can't go in. But look to the east, look to the north, look to the south. And then look to the west. The west is not Israel. The west is him, Moshe, turning around and looking behind him. And I think what Hashem is telling Moshe at this critical moment is that sometimes in life, you have to pause and you have to turn around. And you have to look and say, where did I come from? What was my purpose? What was my goal in this world? Moshe thought my purpose was to enter into Israel. I thought my job was to bring the Jewish people there. But Hashem is telling Moshe, no, your purpose is to stop right here on the edge of the mountain. You could look into Israel, but your purpose, Moshe, was to turn all the way around, to look to the west, which is why the directions are east, north, south, and then west. Usually when we give directions in the Torah, it's east, west, north, south. Here it's on purpose. You have to turn around, Moshe, because you have to see, where did you come from? What is your goal? Right now, Hebrew Academy, along with every other nonprofit, along with every for-profit organization, foundation, business in the world, is at a juncture. We're at this mountaintop. And we're turning around looking to see what happened over the last few months. And we're looking to see over the edge of the cliff, hoping to see, when are we going to reach the promised land? When are we going to get out of this mess? When is this pandemic going to end? When can we reach that moment? When is this going to be over? But we turn around at different junctures, just like Moshe did. And we look at the past. And we look at the history of Hebrew Academy. We look at its founding principles in 1947 and everything that Hebrew Academy has stood for. Along those lines, Hebrew Academy has always been there for our community. And I want to speak about the safety. Usually when we speak about safety in a day school, it's not the safety that we're talking about now. It's talking about the physical safety from someone from the outside, God forbid, doing something to harm the school. But now the safety and the focus in our school is in response to COVID. It's a response to how are we going to keep our students and our teachers safe on campus. It is our plan to start school on August 24th. And school will start on August 24th. We do hope, and it is our ultimate plan, that we're starting in person. We are still moving forward with it. It is a challenging time. We are, the board of directors and the medical advisory committee and the administration are following the news reports. We're following everything that's happening. And we plan to make a final decision by the end of next week as to how we are going to begin. Is it going to be physical, or is it going to be completely virtual? But it is our goal now to begin school on August 24th in person. But what we need from that is safety. And safety, we know on our end that we are doing everything we can to prepare our campus. We're getting special masks, special plexiglass. We have cohorts and we have zones and we have protocols in place to keep the safety of our staff, to keep the safety of our students. But what we need from our community is for each one of you to abide by the guidelines and the safety rules even outside of school. What we need is that when you're in a public place to put on a mask. What we need is we love birthday parties, but we need is for families to say, let's wait a few months. Let's see how we can celebrate in a different way. Avoid places where people are not social distancing. It is incumbent upon us, and each one of us can make the numbers in our community lower. Each one of us have the opportunity. And when school begins, God willing in person, and we greet all the students in, when they leave, they're back into your hands. And we need you, each one of our parent body, to take this seriously, to put on a mask, to not go into places where people aren't social distancing, and to follow the correct hygiene that the guidelines set forward. But along with a shared responsibility of safety, I also feel just the need to talk about the shared responsibility of our community. If Moshe turned around, and what did he see? He saw the Jewish people there. He saw everything that happened in the history of the Jewish people from the time Moshe took over. If we as a school go to a mountaintop and turn around and look at the history, we see pillars of support. We see people who have dedicated their lives to the Hebrew Academy and everything that it has to offer. We see people continuously every single day dedicating themselves to our community. And I'm asking everyone here to also take that into consideration. I know that there are options out there. There are free options for school. We know that's true, and we know many families have called up and said, we're exploring it. We're exploring a free option for our children. But then I get chizuk, I get strength from a family that calls up and says, I know there's a free option, but I value Hebrew Academy. And I want Hebrew Academy to be there after their pandemic. I want Hebrew Academy to survive this situation that it's going through and to come out stronger on the other end. And in order for us to do that, we need the support of the community. We need the support of our parent body to look to our school. And we will do everything we can to maintain the level of education, to maintain the safety on campus. I know many of you have sent me messages in the last hour that another local school, Shek Hillel, announced their plans for next year. And I was reading them the same as you. I was very interested to learn about them. And so a couple people have emailed me and saying, what's Hebrew Academy doing? What's Hebrew Academy doing for the families? And so I was thinking about this in the last 15 minutes as to what is Hebrew Academy doing? And I think a few things. One, Hebrew Academy has always tried to keep our tuition as low as possible. We recognize that paying tuition is challenging for some, and for others it isn't. And we have always tried to maintain as low as tuition as we possibly can, because one of our missions, one of our values is that every single child deserves to have a Jewish education. And by keeping our tuition low, it allows families who may not even think they can afford it to come. And we always give out tremendous financial aid, and the financial aid has been going up since March. Every single day, more applicants have been applying to our school and asking for aid. And our current families who can't afford are asking for aid. And we are providing for those families. And so I don't know the numbers of Sheck Hillel. I don't know how they're doing it. I know that they're going to be just fine. And I know that with your support, Hebrew Academy will also. But we keep our tuition low. We keep our tuition low on purpose. And although there are schools, and there will be more that will give discounts, our tuition will most likely be lower than almost all the discounts that can happen. But as I mentioned in the last meeting, and as it's written inside the brochure that each one of you have read, we are looking into savings, and any savings that we can have, if we have to go virtual, we will pass that on to our families. And we hope that at the same time as our announcement for when we go virtual or when we go in person, we will have the numbers for you so that you can understand what will happen with your financial situation in our school. With that, I wanted to, I have to make sure, is Dr. Delazerte on? There we go. Hello, Dr. Delazerte, how are you? Hold on, we have to unmute you. Okay, I can barely hear you. You okay? Could you say hi? Still can't hear you. Nope. Okay, so while you're figuring out while you're figuring out the technical side, I just wanted to introduce you so you could work to figure it out. So Dr. Delazerte is a parent in our school. And he's specializing in critical care medicine, internal medicine, and pulmonary critical care. He oversees the intensive care units at the Jackson Healthcare System. You've probably recently seen him on a couple of the television shows being interviewed. Dr. Delazerte is on our medical advisory committee, along with Dr. Dania Wolfson, Dr. Ari Cement, and Dr. Gary Rosenbaum. And as a board representative, we have Jean Lehman on as well. And so Dr. Delazerte, as well as the rest of the medical committee, has been advising us and giving us input as to procedures in our school. And I asked him to come this evening to discuss a little bit about what's happening in South Florida, in particular Miami, as well as the school. So let's try your voice now.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, excellent.
Perfect.
That is so good. Okay, so can you give us a little bit of an inside scoop as to what's happening in the hospitals in South Florida, as well as some of the recent medications that have come out about how to deal with COVID?
Perfect. So thank you. I have an issue with my voice today, and I'm COVID negative anyway. So I think the AC is new in my office. So, so what we're seeing in Jackson is a decrease in the amount of new patients coming to the emergency room. So one thing that we are seeing actually in the state of Florida is a decrease in the positive cases that you can see in the communities, followed by decreased amount of new patients that we see in the emergency room. Our census in the hospital is still high, but that's expected. So the patients in the hospital stay longer, especially those patients in the ICU. ICU stay can be up to 2 or 3 weeks. So we will continue seeing a good amount of patients in the hospitals for the next month or so. Even in New York, they still have a high census in the hospitals. So the good news is we're seeing less positive cases. And from everybody coming to the emergency room last week, 20 of those cases were positive for COVID. Right now it's about 5 to 10%. So less people are actually having positive COVID cases in our emergency room. I'm talking about Jackson Memorial and University of Miami Hospital. That's where I work and that's where I know this information.
Okay, sorry, I have to apologize. I forgot to mention Nurse Lynn, also on our medical advisory committee. So I apologize to you, Nurse Lynn, who have been guiding us and taking notes so very much. So thank you for that. Can you tell us a little bit about the modeling that is happening in terms of how you guys predict patients, the rise of it, and what ramifications that are for our school?
So University of Miami work with different models that we have taken from other places like New York, Italy, France, and China, of course. And we see how many new patients you have per day and how many positive cases are coming in the community. So you can kind of predict how many beds you need to have. Our prediction models, we know that this is the week we are going to see the peak, which is already reached by about Friday of last week. We reached the peak. And right now we start seeing less cases. So our prediction model say like our peak was reached this week and slowly we are going to decrease the amount of inpatient. This is only a model for inpatient, so we can plan the different ICUs and the different floors. We also see from the Miami-Dade County, that's a public information, you can go to the website. There are less positive cases coming in the last 3 days. And that's kind of the prediction models that we have.
And so we are looking to open school August 24th. I know that we've been talking probably since March about this. What are your thoughts in terms of you've been involved in implementing some of the safety precautions in our school and advising us? Can you elaborate about what are your thoughts on opening the zones, the cohorts, and yeah.
I think the CDC published the guidelines a week ago, and I still believe that if you do it in a way with the zones and all the measurements the school is going to implement, we are able to open schools. So a lot of schools are going to be open in the next week or so, and if we follow the CDC guidelines and follow the precautions, I mean, I'm going to say my kids that tell you if I feel ready to open the school, we're open. Yes, I have 2 kids and both are going to be joining the Hero Academy. So this is how I trust what we're doing in the Hero Academy.
Thank you. And can you explain a little bit why masks are important? I'm under the assumption now that they are because we have it in our guidelines, but how important are masks for our students and our teachers?
So I think masks are important because one, you protect your neighbor or your colleague of your students by keeping your own saliva. So we know COVID really is in the respiratory airway. There is no proof that you can transmit COVID through your skin or your hair. It's only through the airway. So sputum, when you cough, when you sneeze, when you talk. So by having a mask is that you're keeping your respiratory droplets inside the mask. So you will protect your neighbors. So you protect yourself and you also protect your neighbors in the same way. That is more for students. I don't think for students we need to go the N95. That will be an extra precaution, but at least having the masks will decrease the amount of infection. It's not 100% protection, but give you a good amount of protection for you and your neighbor. It's mainly to protect your neighbor, but by having everybody masks, you will decrease the amount of droplets in the air that contain virus. So you will decrease the risk of actually getting infected by the virus. There is some politics involved in masks, which I don't get involved in politics, but there is also research about masks and about the droplets in the air. And that's why we're looking for this, the evidence-based medicine, not the politics-based medicine.
Thank you. And can you explain a little bit about the quarantine? Like what happens if a teacher in the room contracts a virus or a child in a room contracts a virus versus a parent at home of a child in the class that contracts a virus or a sibling?
So we know that kids are less, it's less risky to have anything carriers. What I mean with that If you have a parent at home that is COVID positive and you have the kid, the risk of that kid to have COVID, we know that is very small. There is some news in the last few days talking about so many kids with COVID. I mean, I work in Jackson, which is one of the biggest places. We do not have many kids with COVID. So I think this is kind of the media and the way the news are actually produced. So I mean with quarantine, if somebody that is in the group, the teacher or the kids is positive for COVID, they need to quarantine for 2 weeks, for 14 days. If it's somebody that is outside, meaning a parent is sick with COVID, you will need to test the kid of that parent. If the kid is positive, you have to quarantine the entire cohort that we have. If the kid is negative, so the risk of infection is really low.
Okay. And what about temperatures and symptoms that we as parents can look out for?
So that has been changing quite a lot. So fevers is in about 30% of the cases only. And you know, with COVID, there is so many different symptoms that you can have, but it's really flu-like symptoms. When you have headache, you feel weak, you have diarrhea, any change in your usual health is a sign that you may have COVID. And that is important, you know, because if we open schools, we need to be sure that we are in this together. So if you have a little bit of a fever or you feel sick for a day, don't send the kids. That is important. It's very difficult to differentiate between COVID and just regular flu or influenza. So I think we have to be very careful with anybody having symptoms. They should stay home.
Okay. And what are your thoughts? I know I've heard different bits of information about catching COVID a second time. What are your thoughts on whether or not it's possible? Or, you know, I've heard different doctors saying different things.
You know, there is no proven case that somebody had second time coronavirus, the same COVID-19. So remember, coronavirus, there is like so many different coronavirus. So as soon as the virus mutates, yes, you can get another one. But the COVID-19 that we know, there is not really any evidence that you can get it second time. So there is some reports, but there is not a strong evidence that you can point out saying like, yes, I have proof that the patient was infected, got better, and now is infected again. There is no proof. There is some reports, but nothing that is evidence-based in medicine.
All right. And what other bits of information do you think you can share with us this evening about the situation, about school, about safety, about responsibility?
You know, as you mentioned, I think schools can do as much as possible. It's about the parents and how we take care of our kids. If a kid is having any symptoms, we need to speak up. And also, you know, COVID-19, people should not be ashamed to say, you know, I may have COVID-19. It's not like you're saying I have HIV. This is something we all need to know so we can take responsibility and protect ourselves. So I think anybody that have any family members with COVID or are quarantined because of COVID need to speak up, call Nurse Lynn, call school so we can take precautions. I don't think we should hide these things. You know, we have in the JCC in Aventura, there was an issue that some families hide the COVID-19 and they closed the camp because so many people got infected. Here in Miami Beach, JCC, I think people are more upfront when they got COVID. So what they did here in Miami, JCC in the Miami Beach here, I like the way they did it. And after 6 weeks, my kids go to JCC. There are not really any report COVID-19 from camp. The last thing is, remember, we live in Miami, so it's a hot zone. So we will see positive cases coming. Doesn't mean that the cases came from school. You can have a positive case if you go to Publix, if you go to Walgreens. So we will have positive cases. It's the way we are going to prepare to deal with those positive cases. I think it's also very important to understand.
And can you explain a little bit how the testing, I'm hearing that sometimes the testing is not so good or it's not accurate. There are people who tested positive and negative or negative and positive. Can you explain a little bit about the history of the test in the last few months and where we are at now and what do you predict will happen in the coming months?
So, you know, a lot of the test that we do because of the whole pandemic. So the FDA didn't really look into the details. So a lot of these testing are not really FDA approved. Now FDA is catching up with all this testing that we have. So we have what we call the PCR. PCR is the swab in the swab in the nose. You look for virus. That is, if it's positive, it's pretty good. If it's negative, doesn't necessarily mean that you don't have the virus. The antibodies or the rapid test that you can go to your neighbor clinic, we don't know how accurate those are because again, they are not really FDA approved. Recently, we have now in Jackson and UHealth a really good test, which is called PCR in the blood, meaning we can measure in the blood the presence of the virus and we can tell how much you have. And that's really the most promising one. One, you can have it in 2 hours. And second, it's not depending who is doing the test. If you do a nasal swab, I did already like 5 different nasal swab in the whole 6 months dealing with COVID. And each of those times is different the way they do it. Sometimes they go deeper, sometimes they go just through the nose. So the technique may change your results. When you have a blood sample, it's just a blood sample. So you can really accurately know if somebody is having COVID-19. Antibodies are getting better, but I don't think they are ready to be so accurate that we can trust them without having a PCR or identifying the virus in the blood. I think that that's going to be really the future of COVID-19 will be this PCR or detecting the virus in the blood. That will be the most accurate one.
So how would you recommend someone go get tested with this?
I mean, all depends. I don't, testing asymptomatic people, there is a lot of issues. I'm not 100% sure that's why we should do. If somebody get a COVID positive and we want to test that person, probably I would recommend to get this test in the blood because it's most accurate, but also it's very rapid test. So within 2 hours, we will know who is positive and who is not. So we can actually take action about the contacts in school.
And where can someone go to get this test done?
For now, it's pretty restricted. So you can get it in Jackson and in the UHealth Tower, but only a specific group of people because we just deployed this week and it's slowly being open to different type of groups. I'm sure we can have some special relationship between the school and the UHealth system to get this test done a little bit sooner than later. I don't know about other hospitals. I don't really know about Mount Sinai or other systems, how accurate the tests are. I just don't know.
Okay. You mentioned masks beforehand about the different types of masks. Can you elaborate the difference between the cloth masks, the bandana gaiters, the N95s, and which ones would you recommend or you think are acceptable to be worn in a public area or an area where students will be learning in a classroom with a teacher?
You know, so the surgical mask, the regular surgical mask, is the one that is the best. The cloth and the cover-ups, they're also pretty good, but some small studies show that maybe the surgical masks are better than the cloths. For anybody with any risk factors at home or the teachers or anybody older, I think they should wear N95s. N95 protect you and protect others. So N95 is like the gold standard for anybody that is an adult or any issues with their health that they need to have extra precautions. For the regular kids, I think a surgical mask should be more than enough.
Okay, thank you. Anything else you want to add before we go to our boss switch? And then afterwards, we'll have some hopefully opportunity for questions from parents.
I mean, not really. I think it's a balance between open and how it's important for kids to be back in school. I do believe, and I strongly believe that COVID-19 is going to be with us for many more months to go. So it's not like we're talking about let's postpone school for 3 months. Probably we will start talking about COVID-19 next year by the summer. So the vaccines are not going to be what people believe, that you start doing vaccines and then by December, COVID-19 is out. COVID-19 is going to be in our community for a long time. So we just need to learn how to deal with COVID-19 and keep living our lives with COVID-19. We need to take precautions so we don't overrun the health systems. We need to social distancing. We need to wear masks. And one last thing I want to say, even if the school takes all these precautions, parents and kids at home, they also need to take precautions because If you go home and go to parties or things like that, whatever you do in school, it will not work. So I think we need to recognize that we have to be together in this and protect ourselves. And again, I think COVID will be here for a long time. So just postponing school for a few months, I don't think that is the answer, because it's part of our life now, and it will be for the next year or so.
Thank you. Wasn't so excited about that last point, but I really do appreciate it. So thank you, Doctor. So I'm going to transfer the camera over to Rabbi Boswich, who's going to give an educational overview on our program coming up. And I really hope that everyone tunes in next week when we go into a deep dive into each of the divisions, focusing on the curriculum, the scheduling, the program, what has changed since the last online learning, since last physical learning. Rabbi Boswich, it's all you.
Hi, everybody. Good evening. It's great to see so many of you. We're over 200 people here. And as Rabbi Guttenberg said, what I'd really like to do with you is just share some overarching educational principles and beliefs going into the coming school year, with a few key design features that emerge from those beliefs. And then finally, address a question that's come our way many, many times. So first, I'd like to share with you 5 key educational principles and beliefs that inform our program moving forward. First and foremost, we believe that we are going to weather this storm. We're going to weather this storm as a community, and we are going to emerge more resilient, more compassionate, more grateful, and more educated, as will each and every one of your children. In that light, we are here and will continue to be here to help your child thrive under adverse conditions. And by extension, we understand in the Hebrew Academy family, we're also here to help every single household of yours, right? Because the children in our school do not live in a vacuum. They're part of a family and part of a household. And by extension, we're here to help each and every household. Beyond that, we're here for each other in the Hebrew Academy community. So the first fundamental belief that we have, not only are we going to weather this storm, but collectively we're going to cultivate the midot tovot that we all aspire to. We are going to cultivate more compassionate, resilient, grateful, thoughtful, nuanced children and adults in our community. And ultimately, we're here to help the world thrive during a time that needs it. Second, we believe that your children are not academic learners in a vacuum, checking off boxes as they go across every subject area. Our program is not simply delivering ingredients. Our program is a whole experience for your entire family, and the whole has to be and is always greater. Third, we believe strongly that learners thrive amidst human relationships. And those human relationships are among students with each other, students with teachers, students with administrators, administrators with teachers, and teachers and administrators with families. We believe strongly that technology is a means and a starting point, but technology has never been the core of teaching. So while we'll outline a number of tools, and you'll hear much more about it next week, we understand the guts of teaching and learning, and that exalted experience happens within a relationship. And finally, we believe that all students in the Hebrew Academy deserve a full program. And what I mean by that is there might be some times where a student is sick at home and we don't have by design a full program for that student, but we understand that this coming year, as Dr. De La Zerda said, is not going to be a typical school year. The analogy that I've given is if you send your child to camp and in a particular summer, there are a couple of kids with some food allergies. So for that summer, you might need to speak to a counselor, you might need to speak to a nutritionist and the head of the camp. But if you entered a camp summer where anywhere close to half the kids at camp had profound dietary needs, all of a sudden you would redesign any element of your camp in order to accommodate the needs of everybody involved. So those are 5 key educational principles that we are going to weather this storm and further cultivate in all of your children, the midot tovot that we aspire to, that your children are not merely academic robots, but live in the world and have feelings and thoughts and spiritual needs and emotional needs. We believe that learning thrives within relationships and across relationships, that technology is never going to be the core of teaching and learning. That happens within the human mind and the human spirit. And finally, that each and every student, whether school is physically open and your child is at home, whether all students are at home, in any capacity, all of our students deserve a full program. With that in mind, I'd like to share with you 3 key design features that you can expect, all of which are fundamentally different than we went into what some call emergency COVID teaching and learning this past March. And the first one is, to the extent that we can, K through 12, you will see that there is a consistent schedule, whether school is physically open or physically closed. If school is physically open and at any given point in time, your child is at home or a particular cohort or zone has to close physically, we're looking for, to the extent that we can, stability and continuity for our staff, for our parents, and for each and every student. And to that end, you will not see 2 radically different schedules as we did this past spring across K through 12. You're going to see a very consistent schedule with some slight changes, whether school is physically open or physically closed. And part of that ethic is that we do not have students who are an afterthought. We do not have students who are at home who are not taking into account. And we're trying to minimize, to whatever extent we can, the variability, which sometimes comes late at night or early in the morning. A test comes back positive, and we're not looking to throw our school community or any segment of that into chaos in any way. Second, all of our principals and faculty across our team have looked at every area of our curriculum in order to see, are there any programs that have more digital flexibility? And what I mean by that is, if, for example, we had a science program that was mainly brick and mortar, it was physical materials, physical books, but we look at an equally valid or outstanding science program that has much more digital capacity. There's a platform that students can go into. There's self-pacing for students. There's assessment information for teachers. We have made a number of transfers over to those types of programs. We have also, in a few key areas, looked at in Judaic studies in middle and high school, having division study the same areas of Chumash or Gemara, which you'll hear more about next week, to provide more flexibility for students and faculty during these unique times. And finally, unlike this past spring, we're very mindful and sensitive to what in the business world they would call the user experience. And what we mean by that is, particularly for elementary school students and parents, but really across our school, we're looking for this coming year to provide a series of tutorials for families, for all of the different programs that exist, streamlining the different websites that your children use. We're even looking at streamlining logins so that you do not have to run around the house or sift through all these different emails to find out how you or your child can access some of our programs. And now, with those 3 things in mind, which you'll hear about more on a divisional basis next week, that would be a consistent schedule, a flexible curriculum for a digital world, and an improved user experience. I would like to address head on, because many of you have asked me directly, speak for a minute about the difference between Hebrew Academy and something like Florida Virtual School or a free program that we might find elsewhere. And I would say for me, that really boils down to 5 different points. First and foremost, a school like Florida Virtual will help you answer the question, what do you want your child to work on today? But a school like Florida Virtual will never answer the question for you, who do you want your child to learn with today? And who do you want your child to learn from today? Because that's not something that they offer. Second, Florida Virtual will establish a relationship between your child and a single adult, a single teacher. You may have another contact in case you're running into difficulty, and I tell you this as a parent of a few children who have done some coursework on Florida Virtual, but there would be a minimum relationship. You're certainly not talking about an infrastructure with a school psychologist, rabbis involved, a head of school, specialist, and you certainly will not have a team of people on their end who is looking at your entire family and everything going on in your household with you or your spouse or any of your other children, and certainly not people who think about your children holistically. We go back to the notion of this is your child and their math proficiency rather than this is your child and how is he or she doing. Next, I would say, for the most part, Florida Virtual has minimal live synchronous instruction. That means that for the most part, your child is not interacting with other children in real time. Your child is typically not interacting with the teacher in real time. It is primarily putting your child in front of a self-guided coursework with check-ins with the teacher, in contrast to a daily program here at Hebrew Academy, which is synchronous and live, and with a community of learners that you want your children to be around. Fourth, a place like Florida Virtual will certainly guide your child to complete the assignment that he or she has to do. But a place like Hebrew Academy will guide your child to change the world. And finally, it is true that Florida Virtual is completely free, but Hebrew Academy education is priceless. Excuse the cliche. It has never been more necessary. We are very excited to welcome back all of your children, whether they join us and rejoin us physically or virtually. Our team is incredibly hard at work throughout days, nights, and many of them weekends as well. And as we said, we'll hand it over next week to each divisional principal to address the myriad of questions that you've asked us, which are really specific to your child's grade level. So thank you for this opportunity, and I wish you all well.
Thank you, Rabbi Basowich. And for those who weren't able to see Rabbi Basowich the entire time, at least we were able to hear him so nicely. So I want to take this opportunity. We have a few minutes left. If there are any questions from participants here, we will do our best to answer them. If you could raise your hand by using the Zoom feature, and just let me know if the question is for myself, Dr. De La Zerde, or Rabbi Basowich. Okay, Emily Ebner.
Hi, can you hear me?
Yes, we can't see you, we can hear you.
Okay, yeah, okay, that's fine. Thank you so much. I just wanted to say that I actually had a daughter who did experience FLVS for one class in high school, and I completely agree with what Rabbi Basowich has said. You do not have all of the things that Hebrew Academy offers, hands down. I also think that the Hebrew Academy did a phenomenal job with the rollout of the virtual program. I heard complaints from people across the board from all different institutions. And I personally, with 3 children who were dealing with virtual in both school and high school, I'm referring to those. I know that elementary and early childhood are different animals, and I know those probably need to be ironed out. But I felt that, and I think many people agree, it was an incredibly successful program. I know that with time, it's only going to get better. I know you guys have been reevaluating, checking things out throughout the summer. I think what I am most concerned about is this eagerness to be in the school. We are avoiding stores. We're all avoiding all kinds of things. I have kids in a camp right now, which is a total bubble. They had to be tested multiple times. Nobody's allowed in, nobody's allowed out. It's a completely different animal. I am highly concerned about people coming in and out of a school, going home, engaging in all kinds of social activities with other people. There's no way that even if you beg and plead, even if a doctor gets online and begs and pleads, there are parents who give their kids Motrin to mask fevers to get to school. You understand what I'm saying? So I think my concern is, I feel like maybe one thing to consider is to show, as you are, and to continue to highlight the incredible benefits of our virtual program, as opposed to pushing maybe the physical, the actual physical attendance, because I'm super concerned about that. It's just something I was wondering whether you guys are indeed, confident that your virtual program was as excellent as it was, and that maybe we push that as opposed to getting into a school with circulating air conditioning and all the other issues that I don't even need to list for you. I know you know what they are.
Okay, so Emily, first of all, I really appreciate the first plug. That was really, really beautiful and so thoughtful of you to start off with. And the second part of the concern, and I'll turn it into a question to address, is why are we pushing to open physically? And I will say this, that we're not pushing to open physically. We know that education is better suited inside a school than at home. We also know, like you pointed out, that for different divisions, education takes place, is very different in early childhood, elementary, middle school, and high school on Zoom. And so we are exploring every option in our school of, we may come out and say, we're going to open this division, these grades, in person, and the other divisions, the other grades will be online. We are exploring those. I don't want to go into as much detail because some people may have lots of questions about it, but that is definitely something that we are exploring of, can we possibly bring in a few grades, use the entire Hebrew Academy campus to social distance, and those will be grades which we know need more attention in person, whereas the other grades start off virtually until we understand exactly what is happening, and then bring them back. We do feel that our campus is right now being set up as safe as can be, but we will not open campus if we feel that we're putting many people at a huge safety risk. And that's where we've been very careful with bringing in doctors. I mean, Dr. De La Zerde and Dr. Cement each spent their day off from the hospital touring our campus, walking up and down the hallways. Dr. De La Zerde even walked all the stairs to the 5th floor of the high school building and then back down and went through every single classroom. They went through with, and then we had an architect, we had Jamie Strauss join us to go through the classrooms, to look at the air conditioning system, and look at every detail to say, can we do this in a safe way? And we do believe educationally it is best suited in person. However, we are taking everything into consideration. But as Rabbi Boswich said, no matter what the final decision is, August 24th, school will start, and there'll be major improvements, and we'll be committed to the Hebrew Academy values that we've always been to.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, Audrey Maman.
Hi. I just want to say, first of all, that working with a lot of other schools, I just know that most of the schools are working to open in person. So Hebrew Academy, I know, is not the only one. And most of the schools we work with are pushing, or not pushing, but are hoping to be able to open in person. I have a question maybe for the doctor. Should a child or someone in a classroom test positive, are we asking for them to remain in quarantine for a week, 2 weeks, and then test negative before coming back? Or are we just letting them do the quarantine and coming back into school?
That is a great question. So for sure, quarantine is mandatory in these cases. The question is which test you should have. And I think if we can get this PCR, this viral load in the blood, that will be the one to go before you go back to school. Because the nose swab can be positive for many more months. Not necessarily you will actually spread the infection. So I would recommend we get the blood, the serology one. And probably, yes. I know the school is working exactly in the policy when to go back, but my recommendation will be quarantine and then test in the blood before you go back.
Right, because I know that there's new guidelines that came out that necessarily the nose swab can be testing, you can test positive for months on end and be asymptomatic. And I know, like, my sister is an OT and she works at Memorial, and she tested positive for the 4th time after being in quarantine for a month and a half, and she is going back to work regardless because they told her. And she works in the heart, the cardiac unit where it's heart transplants and.
Exactly, I agree. So we have.
I will say that we are going to have guidelines out next week, the medical guidelines for the school that we're followed by. One of the things that we are highly considering and most likely will have is that if a child is out of school due to a sickness, they will need a physician's note to return back to school, because that will give us that will be the go ahead for us to say, okay, this physician said it is okay to return.
Well, let's just hope that the physician is not their father or their grandfather or their cousin or brother or.
We're going to send everyone to Dr. De La Zerde.
Let's send them to someone who's neutral. Yeah.
Okay. So, thank you, Audrey. Okay, Gabe Groisman.
Unmute. Okay. Hi, Rabbi. Thank you. Thanks for taking the time, not just tonight, but when I call you to ask what's going on, you're always so open on your thinking. So I appreciate that. My question is with regards to when the decisions are going to be made, and just I wanted to express my opinion, which is that the decision of what the school is going to do and how the school is going to do it should be made as soon as possible, so parents can plan accordingly for childcare, work, etc. And there's no way, I know, teachers and schools, including the public school board, is waiting for the last moment, for the last data points to try to make the best decision possible. But at the end of the day, the decisions are going to have to be made with imperfect data and ever-changing data. And that I think we just have to, in my opinion, we have to take the worst case scenario and say, okay, here's how we're going to open the school, so people can start planning just the practicality of things involved with sending your kids to school, or for alternating or not. And so just, I urge you, if possible, to help put those out as soon as possible.
Yeah, so like I said it originally, and I'll repeat again, our goal is that by the end of next week, that we will have an answer for you. So the first week of August, which is next week, we'll have an answer for that. I agree, it's a very important thing. I appreciate you raising it up. Okay, Sarah Dahan.
Wait, how do I unmute?
I did it for you.
Oh, hi. This is a question for Dr. Zalazerda. He had mentioned, or you had mentioned, surgical masks and also KN95s. So what about the cloth masks? Do those count? Are they useful or not? Because I wear KN95s when I go out, and after about an hour or two, you're like dying in them. And I just can't see my daughter and my son wearing them all day.
I agree with you. So for the purpose of a school and kids in class, the cloth is enough. I'm talking more about if you have anybody in your house that is, for example, immunosuppressed, any diseases that you are very worried, probably an N95 will be the one. But for the general students, as a cloth will be just fine. It will be sufficient.
Okay. Okay, thank you.
And as we spoke about in the previous town hall, there will be times throughout the day for both students and teachers to be in a mask relaxed zone, which will be outside and spaced out, because we do recognize that wearing a mask the entire day is challenging. So there will be a designated place on campus for teachers to go spread out to take their breaks outside with their masks off, as well as the students go outside. Sometimes it'll be during lunch. For K through 8, there'll be athletics, there'll be PE every single day where the students can be outside. So it's such as Schwartz here. Is that Doug? There you go.
Hello?
Yeah.
Good afternoon, thank you. What if Miami Beach issues a stay-at-home order? Does that have any impact on us continuing to go to school?
So if Miami Beach orders a stay-at-home order, then that has an impact on us. We do not have to follow the local public schools, but we do need to follow guidelines set forth by Miami Beach.
Is there a likelihood that that could happen? I heard the mayor talking about that, and it sounds like we wouldn't be exempt from that, taking the kids to school, dropping them off, and bringing them home.
From what I understand from the inside information that I got, is that it's unlikely to happen, although it could. As of now, it didn't, but we are in touch with the city officials. I was on a call with the mayor a few weeks ago discussing this, and so if it comes to that, we have a very good relationship with him and the other officials, and we'll definitely have a conversation.
Thank you.
Oh, for sure. Okay, we have time for a few more questions. There is Rachel Garson.
Hi, Rabbi. How are you? Hi, everyone.
How are you?
Here's a crazy question coming from someone who unfortunately has been sick in her entire family, and we all have antibodies for now. Has there been any talk or consideration of turning each class into its own pod, putting a teacher behind a plexiglass and dropping the masks, but yet social distancing within the classroom? I know that like my nieces in England, their school set up like that for now. I do know schools in the New York area who are in talks about that, but once the children go into the common areas, being the hallways or the entrances, the masks do need to go back on.
So We have thought about it, and the guidelines that we're working with now are that once we're inside, because the way the school is situated, I know you came on a tour, so you are new, and so welcome to you, and also welcome to all the other new families who are joining our school. Until you get into the hallway for a particular zone, you're outside the whole time. And so the policy that we're following is that once you enter into the classroom, the mask will be required to be on. Even just having a plexiglass for the teachers, we felt like is not protecting them as much as we possibly can. But there will be times in the school day where students can take their masks off. And I'm not sure if you were alluding to this question, but I'll answer it. If someone did have COVID and has antibodies, we're going to still require them to wear a mask in school. The reason why is because we don't want certain kids running around with a mask and certain kids aren't. If we're in this together, we want everyone to be wearing a mask inside the school at the same time. Having one child on and one child on off, I don't think would work. But it's a really, really good question. Okay, we have time for a few more. Tila, I see you there.
Hi, Rabbi.
Hello, how are you?
Good, thank you. Thank you for everything. I have a question that's for high school and I have a question that's for ECE. My high school question is there still the option to fully opt to the virtual learning? Yes. 100% without coming into school, no matter what the school decides?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. And
okay, I think we lost Tila. Hopefully she'll be back.
I'm here. Do you hear me?
Sorry, we didn't catch your ECE question.
Okay. Well, no. The student that is not attending classes will have access to every single one of their classes virtually?
Yes.
Okay. And my early childhood one is that if our children are not going to school, because if we're opting for all our kids not to go to school, it's as if you send one, it's as if you really send them all. So if our kids are not going to school, but by, let's say, January, we're better, the county's better, and a family decides that their kids will go to school, is there going to be a later registration option with a prorated rate, or it's still you have to pay for the whole year, all or nothing?
It's a good question. I know that in the past, that you paid for the whole year up until a certain point. I think for the first few months of the school, if you join, 3 days later or a month later, I don't know the exact date as to when that changes. So I'm unfamiliar with that, but I can definitely look into that and get back to you on that one.
Okay, thank you.
Great question. Thank you, Tila. Okay, we have time for a few more. Jonathan Weiss.
Hey, Rabbi, how are you?
Good.
Thank you. First off, thank you for the sense of community that you're creating here and the sense of responsibility that we all have in this together for each other. If a kid's sick, you just got to leave the kid home and get them tested and not just send them to school. So thank you for that. Earlier, we attended the nursery school forum of the kind, and it seemed like school was open. We were sending the kids to school, and today it seems like we don't know until next week. So I just wanted to clarify, are we opening or are we still waiting?
Great question. So our goal is to open physical school. If we make a decision not to have school physically open on August 24th, we will let you know. So we are going ahead with our plan A, which is opening school from early childhood through 12th grade, and there being Zoom availabilities for kindergarten through 12th grade for every single classroom throughout the entire day. If a family chooses to stay home, they will have the opportunity to Zoom into every single class. All of the materials from kindergarten through 12th grade will be made available to a family that chooses not to be home. We spoke about last week that the early childhood, if we need to close early childhood, due to COVID, that we will not be offering Zoom classes for the early childhood. And you can refer to the early childhood emails that went out last week about that. But our goal is to open, and by next week we will have a answer if that decision changes. But that is our focus right now. Okay, last question from says Simha.
Hi.
I'm the father.
Yeah, I'm the father. This is Jaime Hadida, and I do have a question. If God willing, if we can send the kids to school, will they be able to have just a regular face shield instead of a mask, or that wouldn't suffice?
Our medical advisors guided us that a mask is better than a face shield because of the way that the droplets fall. We are going to be receiving, and this a thank you to Joey and Lindsay Schottenstein. They sponsored special masks for our teachers. So if you're on a call, thank you guys for the support. Special clear masks that were ordered for our teachers so that it could be completely clear and students can see. But the face shield is not as recommended as a mask. A mask is a better protection than a face shield. Well, thank you very much, everyone, for participating. It was really nice to see you. I wish everyone a Tzom Kal, that Tisha B'Av should, Tisha B'Av is called a moed, it is called a holiday, and we do hope that through mourning on Tisha B'Av as a community, that we can we've overcome so much in the Jewish people's history, and that it says those who have seen, those who mourn the destruction will merit to see it be rebuilt. And I feel the same applies to our school, that those who are with the school during a challenging time will also merit to see the school in its glory, fully open with everyone back on campus and the pandemic behind us. So wishing everyone a Tzom Kal. I'm looking forward to seeing everyone next week on all of the individual town halls. Laila Tov.